Welcome, Ann-Marie. Thank you for joining us. And what we'd like to do is we have a few questions for you. First, starting off, can you share with us your source of inspiration?
Interesting. It's all around me. I mentioned to you before that I live on 12 acres, and it's filled with the most gorgeous growing things. And nature has always been kind of I call nature my muse. And these trees, I actually have done a series of trees and vines that they've been kind of an area of interest for me for several years. And this is part of a series that I've done of larger works that are trees that I just couldn't get out of my mind, or trees that in some way had an emotional grab on me. The past couple of years, I've done a lot of work about trees and vines, and there are things that, first of all, I think they're absolutely beautiful, but I think of them as old souls, and I am very drawn to them all the time, and certain ones just appeal to me, and I can't get them out of my mind until I, in some way, put them in an image form. The first one that I did was when I visited Olana, Frederick Church's house, and my friends from college that were with me were all looking over at the Hudson Valley and the river, and I noticed that I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at a tree, and it was very gnarly and covered with vines, and I ended up taking a photograph and coming back, and that sort of started the series. And the second one happened when I moved here to Seekonk about 26 years ago. My house is in a field, and there was very little growing around it. And my father, who had the greenest green thumb, brought over two tiny little twigs of pussy willows that he had rooted, and they were in Dixie cups, and we planted them. And over the years, I had no idea, but they grew into these huge, beautiful trees. And, when my dad passed, I remember thinking, he always said, you're going to remember me by the things I gave you to grow. And these pussy willows were, very gnarled and lots of things broken off, but they would sprout new branches. And I thought, I've got to do that one. So that was my second one. And the third one, which is the one that's in the show, Oracle, that goes back, that tree, believe it or not, goes back in my history over 50 years. And it's on the property of my husband's uncle and aunt. When I met my husband, I was 16 years old, and we were friends, and he had a cousin, and that was his residence. It was in Rehoboth, and in an incredibly beautiful location, high on a hill, overlooked the shad factory. And we became friends, and I spent a lot of time on that property. Little did I know that property was going to become something that was in my life for a very long time, because I ended up marrying one of those people. And, we still remained very close friends. We ended up living in apartments together. We ended up buying a house together. We were sort of like a triumvirate. Our family grew, and that house, because of the importance in the family, we spent Christmas there. We did Easter egg hunts there. So my connection to that piece of property was very, very strong and full of very happy memories. And when my husband's cousin died, we helped him, basically go and sort out the property and the things that were there. And while my husband and his cousin were, looking at the objects in the barn and getting rid of things, I was outside and I was looking at, this tree was actually a pear tree. And it was very old, and it was very damaged by, storms and age, and, it had branches missing, and you could see it had this huge kind of open gap in it. And I kept looking at that tree and thinking, oh my God, that tree was probably a young, productive tree, over 50 years ago. And I was here, I was here when that tree was young, and now that tree, I could identify with the tree. Let's put it that way. I thought, the resilience of trees just moved me. And once again, I said, I have to do that tree. So I did the tree. I came home, I had a photograph of it, and when I do them, there's something about it brings me closer to the subject, because they are very time consuming. You can see I have a kind of my technique is not quick. It's very slow building up of image. And so I spend a lot of time on them, and so I can contemplate what the subject is while I'm doing it. And it just brings me a great deal of comfort. So I've done many, many trees. Certain ones I'll be driving around and I might go by it, and then I'll go by it again and buy it again, and I'll end up doing that tree.
With regard to the oracle, the piece that you put in the show,
Mm-hmm.
we're particularly drawn to the use of media in that piece, the colored tape.
Uh-huh.
Tape. And so we wanted to know why you chose to use tape.
I've been actually using colored tape for years, and that's another thing that's I've kind of become known as the artist who uses tape. There's not many people do, and it's a technique that I developed on my own. And oh, what a cute dog! I developed it by, it was an inadvertent kind of thing that happened. I used to grow, like I said, I've lived on areas where we've had farmland, and I used to grow these hard-shelled gourds, and I used to make vessels out of them and sculpture out of them. And when I painted them, I would use a masking technique with my paint. So I would paint a color, I would cut out artist tape, place it down, paint over it, take the pieces off, and there'd be bits and pieces of tape, and I would stick them on my leg as I worked. And then one day I just had this revelation. I looked down at these little teeny beautiful colored pieces of tape, and I thought, why am I throwing that away? Maybe I can do something. So then I began to simultaneously paint the gourds and have large paper there and use those bits of tape, and I would build up images with them. And ironically, one of the first works that I did was actually in the Imago Gallery in one of the community shows. It was called Germination. And I loved doing it. But then I got so intrigued by how I could sort of cut and lay something down, but then move it if I didn't like it, I became more methodical about then just laying out strips of tape and painting them, and painting different gradations and painting different textures. And so all of a sudden my focus became not as tape as something extra and do something with it, but actually as the focus of a material that I could use. And so now I literally have hundreds and hundreds of strips of tape. And it's my palette, so as some people would have a palette with, all different colors of paint on it, I have my tape palette, warm colors, cool colors, solids, gradations, and I use them in conjunction with, painting, drawing, ink, whatever. It's just my way of building up an image. So I can't say all of my work uses tape, but most of my work uses tape.
In this piece in particular, you used tape, and what other media did you use?
I did some painting as a preliminary part of the trunk. I also used colored pencil to do the background, and many layers of that. Some ink, so those little dots, but most of the building up was of tape. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are very intrigued by it when they see my work out. I kind of, if I go to a reception, I can get a big kick out of people who will come up, and you can tell that they're looking at it and they're not quite sure what they're looking at, and they're trying to figure it out because it's just not a common material that most artists use. I also do put I put coating of varnish on it, so it's very permanent. I have work that's quite old now, and it shows absolutely no sign of deterioration. So it's a pretty permanent way of working too, that I think will hold up over time.
It's beautiful.
Ann-Marie, so do you have a palette that you prepare of all these different colors, or is it when you're working, is that when you are developing?
No, I literally have, I wish but I have, when I say hundreds, really hundreds of strips. I put them on a slick surface. So I actually have taken things like shower curtains and cut just long strips of the vinyl and just lay it on there. Because people would think, well, do you use an X-Acto blade? And I go, no, absolutely not. So I actually have taken things like shower curtains and cut just long strips of the vinyl and just lay it on there. Because people would think, well, do you use an X-Acto blade? And I go, no, absolutely not. I use scissors because I can lift it up, cut a shape, put it back down. I don't want to waste any of it. So I'm very efficient in how I use the tape.
And what tape? What kind of tape is it? Just
it's a white artist tape.
Okay, so white.
And it's interesting because during the pandemic, when you have a lot of time, I actually began experimenting with using a translucent tape. And it's a painter's tape that's translucent. And I use a watered down acrylic on it. And I've done quite a few work. A couple of the works are in the Attleboro Museum right now in their members show. And it was interesting because the artist tape, it's opaque. So when you lay it down, that's it. It covers up what it goes on. But this translucent tape is quite fascinating in that when I cut shapes out and lay them on one another, you get all kinds of subtleties because they can, it's like laying down layers of watercolor versus something, like a gouache. Mm-hmm. So, and I thought, I did a small work and I thought, that's got a lot of potential. So I think I'll be probably using some of that too. And what might be fun in the future is to combine, both the opaque tape and the more translucent tape. So it really is like, I feel like, painting is a pretty direct way of, making an image. This is too, but it's more, I feel like I'm building it. With scissors. And like I said, I can lay something down, I can move it. If I put one color next to another and I don't like, the way they're interacting, I can just lift it up and try something else. So there's a lot of possibilities. I've actually done workshops where I've taught people the technique and most people have left saying, nah, it's just too, I don't have the patience for it. But, if I'm pretty adept with scissors, so I can cut tape to be, as thin as a hair and lay down very, very delicate kind of things. And I love working that way. I love the flexibility and I just love what I can do with it.
How about how did you select the name of the piece?
I think it was probably because I started thinking about the longevity of my relationship in that tree has been present in my life, even though I wasn't that aware of it, for over 50 years. And it's sort of seen. I think when I think of trees, I think of them as old souls. And I kept thinking when I looked at that tree, it looked as though it were speaking to me. So, and I kept staring at it and I thought, oh, you could have seen into the, I thought of an oracle as something that could see into the future and tell me, what could happen or what might my life have. And I'm thinking, when I thought back of the first time I saw that tree, I was 16 years old and now I'm quite a bit older. And, there have been a lot of things that happened in my life, most good, but some not so good. So I thought of it as this oracle of something that had knowledge of me and could have spoken to me if I perhaps were open to it. So, I think it primarily happened because of that open sort of area that looked as though it were speaking and making some pronouncement about my life. And that's how I saw it. So I thought, yes, it's an oracle. I'm going to name it Oracle.
Wow, interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful.